This is C K Vishwakarma, and you're watching Expert Insights by All Things Connected. Today, with me in the conversation is Surendra Vyas. He has recently authored a book called The Great Leveler, which we'll talk about as well. I know Surendra since 1998 because we went to the same school, IIT Roorkee, and in fact, in the same degree, electrical engineering. Welcome, Surendra. Again, having you here is my pleasure.
Hi, CK. Thank you. Thanks a lot for having me. Nice to see you and talk to you again after some time, and looking forward to an interesting conversation.
And like we know each other for quite some time, but for the benefit of the viewers, maybe could you please tell a little bit about your journey, post-IT journey, specifically?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, I've been around in the field of innovation and IP for 18 plus years, sort of ever since we graduated. It was an accidental move. I was supposed to join a software firm, but like we have been facing the uncertainty in last 1 year, similarly, as you would recall, the year we graduated due to 9/11, there were a lot of uncertainties, jobs were moved, jobs were cancelled. And I accidentally moved into another company, which was a startup in the field of IP. And I liked the space, I liked the company, and just got into it and kept moving as things spaced up. I also did a small startup for around 3 years in a similar space, providing IP services, and then moved around a few large corporate in-house IP teams, managing patent portfolios, IP strategy of the company, looking at the searching, analysis, landscaping, various facets of IP analysis and strategy within the corporate. So that's been my experience. And very recently, I tried to pen down some of that in the book that you just talked about.
So let's start getting few definitions correct. In your profession, I'm sure you hear these terms: innovative technologies, emerging technologies, deep technologies, disruptive, transformative, whatever you want to call XYZ technologies. But what is your definition of innovation and how do you look at this technology landscape? I'm curious how seriously you pay attention when individuals, startups, or even large organizations tell you that, okay, Surendra, I'm working on some emerging technologies.
Yeah, you're right. We come across a lot of these terms, and new terms keeps going. But for me, innovation is a very simple thing. I feel innovation has been around for much longer than we think. We've made it more fashionable recently, but ever since the start of the humankind, I believe innovation have been there. We've been solving problems, and innovation is in a way much simpler than we think. We made a big thing out of it, but everybody is innovating. Everybody is doing something, trying to solve problems, and that's where innovation lies for me. If I look at it as a basic starting point, for me, innovation happens when you think and do something. If there is a thinking involved and you try to implement it or do something around it, that's the core of innovation. Now, whether that's a game-changing innovation, breakthrough innovation, or jugaad innovation, or patentable innovation, that is a separate matter or definition. But starting to think about solving a problem, trying to come up with solutions is what innovation, according to me. And in fact, I was doing a talk some time back around innovation in the times of uncertainty that's happened in the last 1 year, the period of uncertainty that we are looking at. And a lot of innovative ideas have come up. And we were discussing on why this is happening and even looking at some of the previous such scenarios. Say, for example, in the 2008 financial crisis, a lot of new startups evolved in that time. For example, one major example is Airbnb. That's a great innovative idea. Even Alibaba came up big time in 2004 SARS crisis in China. So whenever there is uncertainty, people think there is more innovation happening. And my thought is because that forces you to think. In the regular timing, say 1 year back or before that, we were just getting up, going to our jobs regularly, coming back, doing our work, having dinner, time with family, regular stuff. But due to the pandemic, due to the work from home culture, a lot of things changed. And everybody, corporate, individual, family, students, schools, everyone was forced to think. And that's why a lot of new innovative ideas came up. So that's the core of innovation, according to me, thinking and doing. In terms of the other part of your question and how a lot of startups or other companies talk about breakthrough innovation or other terms that you mentioned. So for me, in general, what matters more is what is the problem that you're trying to solve. For any company, what would matter is what's the business potential of it. You may have some great breakthrough innovations, but where are you applying it? And what could be the commercial benefit of it for a company. So if I can take one example, blockchain, as much as I do, it's a great technology. It's come around a decade or so. It's a great breakthrough technology, and over the years it has evolved, and now we can see its application in so many different areas, be it medical, be it logistics, financial industry, everywhere. So that's a real breakthrough technology, but how are you applying it in your space, and what is the benefit that you are getting out of it is more relevant. It's not important or not necessary that you just force fit blockchain into everything, but wherever there is a need, application, and potential.
So for the discussion further, maybe instead of having those so many terms, well, let's call it just emerging technologies, because this keep emerging. And we've seen a lot of innovations and transformation, as you said, in the last decade, especially due to the convergence of various technologies, right? Like in the IoT or Industrial 4.0 space, when we talk about these terms, we're not just talking about a new innovative fusion sensor or some advanced AI ML technologies, or maybe edge computing, or some new MIMO communication technologies, right? We talk to our clients end-to-end solution and how to build those solutions to solve business or operation problems. And even approach is, once we identify a use case, the problem which you're trying to solve, we then categorize them into a potential solution. The term which you use, for example, category 1 solution could be a simple point solution. Category 3 could be a maybe multi-process solution. Or category 5, which is maybe the more advanced, which has some research element to it to build really new technology which doesn't exist. But still, it is pretty much solutions we talk about, right? And building those solutions, there are some existing technologies we might have to use, provided by a lot of vendors out there. So my question to you is, how do you think the organizations in this solution space could create some intellectual property? Any thoughts? A technology, a product versus a solution space?
Sure. Yeah. Interesting point. I'm thinking as you were speaking. So we get a lot of those discussions internally, externally. I have with internal inventors or external, some of my friends and family. So there are a couple of things that I would like to say here. First is that when we talk of intellectual property, most people think patents, that you have to file a patent. That's an incorrect understanding of it. Intellectual property has a lot of different types under the umbrella. There are copyrights, there are trademarks, there are designs, there are trade secrets, there is know-how, and there are a lot more. There are a lot of different types of intellectual property. So patenting is not the only way to have intellectual property or protect intellectual property. That's one, we'll come to that. Second is about solutions, as you say. So my understanding or my thinking is solutions per se may not be protectable, but you'll have to go deeper into it. What's the level 1 below or level 2 below? What's the again problem that you're solving? You're using different known concept, but you may be changing something within those concepts to apply to a particular use case. So for example, if it's in a smart factory type of a setup, you may know more about it. There are a lot of such solutions going on. You may be using a lot of known technologies in terms of cloud storage or in terms of IoT sensors, all of those. Those are all known things. So you may create a solution, it may have a lot of business value, but it may not have patentability potential, because for patentability, you have to show some technical novelty. So one is that you may still have a trade secret around how you are combining those things and solving for a problem, which you may not want others to know. So keep it as a trade secret, as your internal know-how. That's a strong form of intellectual property. A lot of companies do that. Second is dig deeper into a specific use case. Sometimes you may be solving for a very specific use case. So picking up a different example, say for example, in a smart shopping case online, or even in a merchant location, you may be solving for a specific use case of how to help people who are visually impaired, to help them in their shopping. So that's a specific use case. How are you using all the known solutions or concepts to create a specific solution for that particular use case? What are you doing to make that happen? You'll have to dig deeper into that. And there may be some technical novelties or new innovations that you're creating, which would be claimable as a patent. So you'll have to go down much deeper than the high level solution to identify what can be protected. Generally, when I talk to any innovator, I try to help them structure their idea from a problem, solution, innovation, and IP methodology. So there is a problem that you are trying to solve. You have a solution, which may be a known solution. Great, you may be doing it for a business value. You are increasing efficiency or something. And then based on your mindset, some people want to change things or make things better, or based on the design or the requirement, you may create something new, which may be innovative, which may again be great. You have to identify that. And then out of those innovative ideas, there could be some things which may be patentable or even kept as a trade secret. So it's better to follow this methodology: problem, solution, innovation, and IP. And IP comes at the end. You should not start thinking from it that I have to create an IP. Let that happen in the end automatically. Start with what's the problem you are trying to solve, what's your solution, is there something new that you are doing, and then see if there's a scope or aspect for IP there, and talk to the professionals in that space.
So continuing from there, the solutioning space and is another buzz which we hear a lot. Data is the new oil, right? But in my view, when I converse with the leaders or the organization, our recommendation and also an analogy that we need to know how to build a good oil well, right? So to build a good oil, we need to understand how to find the oil, how to rent the rig, how to build the initial hole in the earth to get the oil, test it out, and then you scale and do the completion. So my thought is the companies and the businesses are moving towards this called data economy, be it the Facebook, Google, Netflix, and the TikTok of the world, or even the industrial companies and enterprises, which I talk to sometime, are also building up their data strategy, that either to enhance their own products or solutions or the processes, or even the people to remain relevant, compete, and sustain in the future. One of the challenges I observe in this process of transformation is how to drive the innovation inside out and as well as outside in. And what I mean by that, for example, the company could be a manufacturing company, but they can always learn from what is happening in, let's say, transportation or healthcare. So in the process of driving the innovation culture, sometimes the large organizations build either a corporate innovation lab or some centers, or host these regular hackathons or challenges out there. So my question to you is, to drive this innovation culture, what are the key things both the large organizations as well as participating startups or individual keep in mind, again, from the innovation and IP point of view?
Yeah, sure. Those are important points, and also there's a lot of misconception, misunderstanding around those. So if I can, let me see if I can help address some of that. So first one, on the data oil part. Yeah, I worked in an oil and gas company before, so I understand some of the analogy that you were making. Also, if you look at it, interestingly, oil is moving out. We are trying to move away from the oil and gas, liquid oil, liquid fuel ecosystem to a more electrical vehicle ecosystem. So if I think a little further in it, again, I'm not an expert here, but I think maybe in the future, data would become a commodity. Everyone would have data. A lot of data is there. The more and more data that we are generating, creating, the more accessibility is there with that data. So data may become more of a commodity. Everyone would have data. There would be some niche areas that is separate. But what would be important is how you are using that data. That's where there could be some more innovation. What's your application? What's your use case? What value are you extracting out of that data? How efficiently you are extracting that value? So even in a finance industry, how you are using transaction data to create more targeted offers for the users, for a credit card user, or for any bank client account holder, how you are giving them better offers. Or even for a Netflix, how is it recommending me the right movie to watch? How they're using that data. There could be 10 different Netflix in future. There are already a lot of streaming platforms, but maybe the differentiator would be who provides me the best recommendation. I used to spend a lot of time trying to find out what to watch rather than to watch. So that time, if somebody can make that selection easier for me, that is a great value. So how you're using my browsing data to provide me better recommendations. And another example, if I can take, is in the medical industry. Again, there's so much data and there's a lot of sensitivity associated with that data. But different institutes or different entities or organization may use that data in a different way. So if there is a medical app builder or a smartwatch which has a medical app built within it, can use your medical history or medical data or live medical data to monitor your health and give you some notifications that maybe you need to take rest or your sugar levels are going up. So that's a very specific use case of the medical data. And another company, say in medical research, may use the data. So for example, in the COVID case, companies may be using some data of medical data to identify who are the type of people who are more prone to being infected and what should be the solution or how should the vaccine be prepared. A third use case could be for, say, insurance companies. They may want to use medical data to see what could be the right set of clients that they may have and what could be the right set of amount of premium they can charge for it. So similar data, but different use cases and different analysis. And within the same use case, there could be different models that come up to analyze that data and come up with results. So the IP part or the innovation part may be more downstream when the data is actually applied. I'm again using the oil and gas analogy, upstream and downstream. So that's on the first part of your question. Second part was around collaboration. So I've talked a bit about that in the book, how it's a no-brainer. You have to collaborate, you have to co-innovate. Large companies, small companies, academic institutes, all of them have different strengths, and they should not try to emulate each other. They should try to work with their strengths and try to collaborate with each other, co-create. The issues around ownership and IP are more legal issues. So again, it needs to be discussed in detail. But in general, a few tips, if I may, is one, to understand your background IP. When we say background IP, it means that when you're getting into something with a partner, you should bring into the table upfront what you already have. It could be filed patents, it could be publications, it could be some trade secrets or know-how that you can share after a confidentiality agreement. And say this we already have built. So anything around this, it should not happen that in future you build something and say this was already done by us. So rather than avoiding that confusion, it's better to bring all your background IP upfront. And second, obviously, you need some legal advice, professional advice there, that what is the going to be the sense of ownership in the solution that you're building, who is bringing what, because you don't know what will be built. Sometimes you come up with ideas which you don't expect would come up during that innovation. So there could be various ways to identify those, what you're actually hoping for or planning for, what's the project, what is the final objective, and then what would be the sharing of IP. If something else comes up during that discussion, who owns what? And those are the typical discussions that should happen and should be put up in a right form of an agreement.
As you mentioned, that a lot of startups or a lot of companies who are building up some solution, they will always think about patenting the ideas in the first stage first. So the focus on the business execution or focus on filing the patent, this is always the dilemma of a lot of technology companies and even for a lot of institutions, as you spoke, right? So all this innovation happens, but don't see the light of commercialization. So in your view, how critical in today's world, where it is already so notorious for technology and solutions companies to find the value in what they create, but going forward, how do you see it's going to be even more difficult for technologies to look into the production, look into the IP side of it? And if yes, how do we address it?
IP is very important. Patents are important. Protecting your ideas are important, but it has to be with a strategy. So again, I always say that thinking about something and thinking through something. So you have to think about something, but you really need to think through something to have a strategy. So if you're thinking about IP, and we need to understand that IP is a business tool. You are filing patents for a particular reason. So before you think about it, you have to think, why do you need it? What is your purpose from a business perspective? Do you want to stop others? Do you think you have a very strong breakthrough technology that can be copied easily as soon as you go out? So you want to protect your innovation. You want to get partnerships so that you have a part of the piece, and then you find you license it out or partner with somebody. Or it could be just for say marketing perspective, that you say that you have a patentable product, you want to put that on your pitch for investment, that also happens. Or even for marketing big products, a lot of companies use those terms that it's a patent pending product, that adds to the value of the product. So there could be various reasons. It could be defensive, it could be more offensive. So you need to understand what is your purpose of filing an IP, and that's where the IP strategy would come in. That first step, why you need it. Once you are clear on that, then there are various steps. So whether you should file in a particular country, in multiple countries, a provisional patent, a PCT patent, there are a lot of those are more procedural parts, which all obviously need some inputs. But the first step on why you need it is more important, especially for startups, because they probably would be working in a limited budget. They can't afford to spend a lot of money. So they should be very clear on their need of IP and their strategy around it. So that's what I always have discussions. That's the first point. And then there are a lot of things, as I said, that will automatically come later as you start talking to some IP professional.
I'm sure since you have to deal with a lot of such innovative technologies, you will potentially be more aware of what is the next wave. If you plot a trend or some sort of that thing, you will know where to invest maybe in 2 years down the line. So instead of listening to Elon Musk and following his Twitter, maybe we should ask you where we should be investing in, because you will be having, I think, better insights on where the industries are moving.
And that's totally out of syllabus question. I have no inputs on that, and I'm no Elon Musk or even a shade of that. But yeah, I think you know better. Digital is definitely the future, wherever we are doing it, at least from business sense. Everything is moving to digital. And although, I mean, I think we are at a place where we don't see the transformation happening on the ground. So you really need to go down at the ground to smaller towns, especially in a big country like India. There's a huge potential of converting that physical to digital potential. So go down, work with those smaller, say, shopkeepers or businessmen, whether it's in their accounts, in their inventory, in their payments, everywhere there's a scope. So at least for the next decade or so, I think it'll definitely take to bridge that digital divide before we can get everyone online.
Right.
That's all I can say on this.
Right. And we are in the important section of our discussion. You recently authored a book, The Great Leveler, and you have the title on your t-shirt as well.
Yeah.
So tell us something about it, and what motivated you to write this book? Who is your target audience when you are writing this book? And what shall one expect to learn from this book without you giving up too much of spoilers within these sessions, because I want them to read the book. So, but few guidelines, what are the motivations and the target and what to expect?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, The Great Leveler was more of a lockdown experiment. Like I said earlier, when we were all put into a lockdown, it was very sudden. And it forced us to think in a lot of ways, not only think how to manage the household chores, but also how to keep yourself busy and healthy. Initially, I started with a lot of Netflixing, but I soon realized that I'm watching things that I just really don't want to watch. So I totally switched off my Netflix. And that's when I was forced to think what to do. And this is one idea that I had in my mind for a long time, at least the basic skeleton, that I want to write something in the form of a story to convey the importance of IP. There is a lot of material, context, or literature available on IP, importance of IP innovation online in the form of books. But still, I used to talk to a lot of my friends, family who would call me, ask me about this. So I thought, why not try something? Because people are more comfortable reading stories than reading a theoretical paper. So I thought if I can create a story around the whole concept and try to explain why IP is important, why innovation is important, why co-creation is important, bring them all together in a very simple, easy to understand fiction that might work or resonate with the people that I generally talk to. In terms of target audience, definitely, I think the idea is to convey the importance of innovation and IP strategy. So anybody who is thinking about innovation, be it a startup or entrepreneur, or even large companies, innovation head, team leads who want to generate ideas and innovation and want to manage it, spur that innovation. I hope they would be able to resonate with it. And obviously the IP professionals who do this day in, day out, I've talked to a lot of IP professionals. They were able to directly relate to it. That's what they do daily. A lot of examples that have created, that have been cited there, and the setups that have been put is something that we see a lot. So yeah, I hope those are some people, and especially students, technical students who may get into innovations or research, IP, and even IP students who may get into that space. So yeah.
This topic is like people perceive this perception that is very complex to understand. But making it a kind of a story as you have done in the book, I think it really will help the experts, not just the expert, but also those young professionals who are getting into innovation space or even into the business of IP.
Yeah, that's the idea. That's why I also coined the term knowledge fiction. I want to
Nice.
write books which would explain some knowledge concept with the help of a fiction. So this is hopefully first in the series. I'll see if there is more interest. I can think of some other
Nice,
topics.
nice. I'll put the link in the description for the audience who must read this book, I'm sure. But on the same note, since it's a story, so do we see the next episode?
Yeah, I have some thoughts on extending the story, as well as I said, picking up some other topics and trying to explain that. There are thoughts, but I mean, I don't know if I need another lockdown to do that, or I'll have to lock down myself to write it. I've
Maybe
not been able to get time. I just wonder sometimes how did I write it. But now if I think that forcefully I plan it, I may not be able to write it. Just happened. So I'll see if I can do it again. But I
I'm
need
sure
some
the
more.
audience will be looking to read the further in depth or maybe different areas of storylines like we have in the typical series. One character will get more attention in the next one, so maybe we'll see something. We'll be excited to see what you have and what the feedback which you listen from the readers, and then maybe you can kind of transform your story as well.
Can we reverse it a bit before we end? Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
I mean, I'm from the innovation and IT space. You are in the IoT. You are an expert in the IoT sensor digitalization all space. So, in your experiences over the year, how do you see? What are your interactions or experiences around the concept of IP or patent? Does that come up in your discussions with your clients or colleagues? And what's the general perception about IP in the community that you work with?
Right. Like you said in the beginning, also, sometimes this definition is also not understood intellectual. They always think of patenting it. Whether I am evaluating a startup, which I do regularly in different part of the world, not just in this region. I talk to the startups from Poland, from Israel, from US. Their concept is pretty much the patent. That's how they look at intellectual property. In fact, means I'm sure how often you have traveled to China, but for example, when I travel to China, and this is like again the culture that when you go to a office, they will see patents, patents, patents on the wall, right? So they look at it as some sort of something unique they have, which can't be broken. But this, I think, there's still a lot of gap, in my view, is there for them to understand intellectual property is not just about filing a patent, but rather securing your idea. And like you said, there are different forms and shape of securing it. Even for the larger companies, I see knowledge gap is still there. They look at it more from the contractual part of it, more from the legal document, which typically they will sign up in their projects or some engagement. They're always worried about how open and how they can engage with the vendors in terms of this new solution, because for them to be smarter, they need to share a lot of insights with these vendors for them to build a solution for them. So sometimes it becomes a chicken and egg also, that how much I can open to them, but at the same time, this vendor should not steal some of their intellectual property, which is more related to the processes, and then sell the same solution which they build with them to somebody else, a competitor maybe, right? So this is also it becomes more of a contractual issue, that how do we make sure that this also can be addressed clearly and be more defensible when they want to adopt such technologies. So yeah, still I think evolving.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, that's correct. That's what it is, I think, around the world. There's a lot of scope for awareness and making people a little more educated about this so that they are more confident that when they are discussing their ideas, technologies in terms of
right.
protection and collaboration.
My last question is to get your view broadly in terms of this global innovation hubs. And traditionally, we see it is more towards either Silicon Valley or like Europe. But in the last decade, also, as we have seen, a lot of innovation hubs moving to places like Bangalore in India or maybe Shanghai or Beijing in China. And more so, even the newer ones are like even Bangladesh or Vietnam or a lot of African countries are booming up. So my last question to you is how do you see this shift of power of innovation hub, and will it also change something in terms of where the investments are coming in, where the business are moving in, just because these regions are now better aware of these things and they also have these young talents. So my this question on broad your view on this global innovation hubs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm no expert on this space. I can just share some thoughts as I see and as I think. Uh, First point is that, yeah, innovation is happening anywhere, and it was happening everywhere, even when we had hubs. We had hubs because the local ecosystem was developed there that sort of encouraged and developed that innovation and even innovation from other locations. So Singapore is definitely a hub for fintech innovation. Doesn't mean that only people there are innovative in fintech. There are people around the world, but Singapore as a country is really encouraging people to come there and their own citizens to work in this space, providing in terms of, say, I don't know, tax benefits or space or even IP protection regimes. So there are various things that the government or a nation can do to spur innovation, which leads to the creation of ecosystem. That's what has sort of developed these hubs over the years. But definitely, as you said, more and more I see innovation is following the market wherever the market is. Traditionally, US, Europe were the biggest market for new developments, new technologies. But over the last decade, a couple of decades, we can say there's big booming markets in China and various parts of Asia, India. So innovation is automatically following these countries, these regions, and the hubs are organically coming up there. So there would definitely be a shift that would happen, which I would think. But more importantly, if we look a little further, a few years or 5 to 10 years down the line, especially for what has happened in the last 1 year, how everything has gone virtual, I think these hubs would be more virtual than physical in a particular country or a region. Any person or developer sitting in, say, Ethiopia can come up with new ideas, new models to maybe better tackle, say, online fraud and payments, and that can be picked up by companies around the world and developed. And there could be various people sitting across different locations come together online, virtually, meet once in a while, have a party, and then go back and work on their ideas. So those would be more virtual come physical hubs. So I think it will get more decentralized than getting it centralized in a hub. In the next 5 to 10 years, that probably would be, if I have to make a prediction, that is a prediction, I would say that these innovation hub would be decentralized.
I think that's a really right approach of mentioning that it's a decentralization of innovation is not centered around a city or a nation or industry. I think I agree with you also that if I have to look ahead, it will be very much decentralization of the innovation and the hubs. The topic is very interesting and we can talk for hours on this, but what we should do, maybe have a follow-up conversation. So for this session today, so first of all, thanks Surendra again for sparing time. It was always wonderful speaking with you on the topic of innovation and the IP.
Thanks a lot, CK, and it was great. This discussion was great, and I'll look forward to more if required and if needed.